They pulled this off the shelves in 1962, not because it was dangerous, not because it stopped working, but because it was too cheap to be profitable. There is a brown bottle sitting in your medicine cabinet right now. You paid about $3 for it, maybe less. And if somebody had sat down with you 20 years ago and told you what the bottle could actually do, you would have walked out of every big box store for the rest of your life with almost nothing in your cart. That is not an exaggeration. That is the math. And the math is exactly why nobody ever told you. What if I told you that a group of people living without televisions, without magazines, without a single radio jingle ever playing in their homes, had been using that same $3 bottle to run an entire household? The medicine cabinet, the kitchen, the laundry room, the garden, the barn, for over 100 years? What if I told you that when researchers actually went in and studied the health outcomes in those homes, they found lower rates of foodborne illness than in the surrounding modern population? Lower. With one bottle, no antibacterial wipes, no color-coded sprays, no specialty formulas, just one brown bottle on a wooden shelf above the sink. That is not a story somebody made up. That is what they found. And once you hear the full picture, you are going to start looking at every bottle under your kitchen sink very differently. Here is where the story begins. Not in a laboratory, not in a hospital, in a farmhouse outside Millersburg, Ohio, sometime in the early 2000s, when someone walked into an Amish home for the first time and noticed something strange about what was not there. No basket of plastic spray bottles under the counter, no cabinet full of specialty products in the bathroom, no row of half-used tubes on the laundry shelf, just one small brown bottle. And that one bottle was doing the work of everything missing. The families living in those homes were not cutting corners. They were not risking their children's health. They were doing exactly what their grandmothers had done, and their grandmothers before them, going back at least 4, and in some cases 5 generations. They had a system. It was tested across a century of farm life, raised on hard winters, and no margin for error, and it worked better than anything the modern cleaning industry had come up with since. That bottle contains hydrogen peroxide, 3% strength. The same concentration your great-grandmother used during wartime rationing when a single bottle had to stretch across every need in the house. The same strength sold to American households since the early 1900s. And here's the part the industry has never wanted you to think too hard about. It is the exact same compound your own immune system manufactures inside your white blood cells every single day. Your body makes this substance. Every time you get a cut, every time a bacterial invader tries to establish itself somewhere it should not be, your immune system deploys hydrogen peroxide as a first-line weapon. Picture that for a moment. Your body, the most sophisticated biological system on the planet, chose this molecule as one of its primary defenses. And somewhere along the way, the household products industry convinced you it was so specialized, so situational, so limited in scope that you needed 15 separate products to replace what it used to do on its own. That replacement did not happen by accident. Between 1960 and 1975, the household chemical market in the United States expanded by over 400%. Not because the population grew that fast, not because homes suddenly got dirtier. 400% in 15 years is a coordinated expansion. It is a deliberate multiplication of what Americans were taught to believe they needed. During that exact same window, entirely new product categories were invented that had never existed before. Specialized grout whiteners, specialized refrigerator deodorizers, specialized cutting board sanitizers, specialized laundry brighteners with their own separate pour cap and their own separate shelf space and their own separate price tag. Every single one of those things, every single one, could be handled by that $3 bottle. And the advertising that drove all of it was not subtle. Glossy magazine spreads and publications like Good Housekeeping and Ladies' Home Journal began telling American women that using one product for multiple purposes was old-fashioned, backwards, unsanitary. They used the word dangerous. They told women that if they loved their families, they would buy the new color-coded bottles for the new color-coded rooms, blue for the bathroom, yellow for the kitchen, pink for laundry, green for the glass. The Amish never saw those ads. They never sat in front of a television watching a smiling spokesperson explain why their neighbor's kitchen was cleaner than theirs. They just kept doing what their grandmothers had taught them, quietly, generation after generation, while the rest of the country was being slowly, methodically, expensively re-educated. Now, let us talk about what this bottle actually does, because this is where the story stops being about history and starts being about tonight, about what you can do before you go to bed. On a fresh cut or scrape, the process is simple. Rinse the wound first with plain water. Get the dirt out mechanically, then pour a small amount of 3% hydrogen peroxide directly onto the wound. You will see it foam. That white bubbling is not theater. That is a chemical reaction between the peroxide and an enzyme called catalase that exists inside damaged tissue. The catalase triggers a release of oxygen gas, and that oxygen physically lifts debris, dead cells, and bacteria up and out of the wound. It is mechanical cleaning driven by chemistry, not magic, not folk medicine. Documented American medical practice going back to clinic rooms in the rural Midwest in the 1920s, where doctors used it on farmers who came in with barbed wire cuts and machinery injuries. The Amish rule, passed down through at least 4 generations of mothers and daughters, was specific. Use it only on the first cleaning. After that, clean water and raw honey. That was the entire wound care protocol. No prescription creams, no specialty ointments, no tubes from the pharmacy. Honey has natural antimicrobial properties that have been documented in peer-reviewed literature for decades. The children in those households ran barefoot all summer on gravel and splintered barn floors, cut themselves constantly, and healed cleanly. Not because they were lucky, because they understood what the product did, used it at the right moment, and then trusted the body to do the rest. That philosophy right there, apply the right thing at the right time and then leave the body alone, is the entire reason their medicine cabinet has 1 bottle and yours has 40. For oral health, the Amish mixed it half and half with water. 30 seconds of swishing, spit, rinse with plain water. It disrupts the bacterial colonies responsible for gingivitis and gradually whitens teeth. A peer-reviewed dental study found measurably whiter teeth after 6 weeks of daily use with a 1% peroxide and baking soda combination. That study has been sitting in a library for years, read by almost nobody, while the whitening toothpaste industry charges $8 for a 2-ounce tube of essentially the same chemistry dressed up in a celebrity-endorsed box. The Amish were mixing baking soda and peroxide into a paste decades before those companies figured out they could package it. For nail fungus, the method was a warm water soak with a generous pour of peroxide, 10 minutes several times a week. Fungus is anaerobic. It cannot survive in a high oxygen environment. This is not alternative thinking. This is basic microbiology that was understood and documented by 1935. For ear discomfort caused by wax buildup, a few drops tilted into the ear canal for 1 minute, then drained. The peroxide softens the wax and breaks it loose. Simple, free, and safe when used correctly, which is how they always used it. Now step into the kitchen, because this is where the story gets bigger. Wooden cutting boards, the ones most of you still have because you know the plastic ones ruin your knife edges, are porous. Dish soap and hot water do not reach bacteria that have migrated into the grain of the wood. Spray the board with peroxide after every use. Let it bubble wherever there is bacterial activity. Rinse with water, stand it upright to dry. That is the method used in Holmes County kitchens going back to at least the 1920s, and it outperforms every antibacterial spray sold for that specific purpose. Cheaper, safer, no synthetic fragrance, no dye, no mystery compound, sitting where you prepare food. Here is something worth knowing about washing produce. A basin of cool water with 1/4 cup of 3% peroxide per gallon, produced soaked for 5 to 10 minutes, will remove surface pesticide residue and bacteria that plain water simply cannot touch. A study published in 2003 found that peroxide solutions significantly reduced E. coli and salmonella on produce surfaces. Peer-reviewed, publicly available. But you will never see it printed on the peroxide bottle because the peroxide bottle is regulated and labeled as a first aid product. And the produce wash industry has its own $8 sprays with celebrity endorsements and nearly identical chemistry. If your home was built before 1980, there are 3 specific problems this bottle handles better than anything on a hardware store shelf today. The mold in your grout lines is not being killed by bleach. Bleach kills the surface, but does not penetrate cement-based grout from that era. The mold comes back within a week because the roots were never touched. Peroxide penetrates. Spray it heavy onto the grout, wait 10 minutes, watch it foam wherever there is active growth, scrub with an old toothbrush, rinse once a month. Grout from 1963 will look the way it did the week it was poured. The rubber gaskets on older refrigerators cannot be bleached. Bleach dries the rubber, the gasket cracks, and suddenly you have cold air leaking and an electric bill climbing. Peroxide does not damage rubber. Soak a cloth in it, wrap it around the gasket for 15 minutes, and the bacteria and buildup lift without touching the integrity of the material. And unlike bleach, when peroxide finishes its job, it breaks down into water and oxygen. No chemical residue sitting next to your food, no perfume, no mystery. White fabrics in houses with older galvanized plumbing have turned gray or yellow over the years, not from wear, but from trace iron, in the water reacting with bleach. Bleach makes it worse. A cup of 3% peroxide added to a hot water wash with regular detergent will brighten whites more effectively than bleach, without damaging elastic, without yellowing synthetic fibers, without eating holes through cotton over repeated washings. And now the garden. This is where it goes from practical to almost unbelievable. In the early 1960s, researchers at several land-grant universities, including Cornell and Ohio State, studied what happened when vegetable seeds were soaked in a dilute peroxide solution before planting. 1 teaspoon of 3% peroxide per cup of water. A few hours of soaking. The seeds germinated faster, sometimes by 2 to 3 days, and at rates 20 to 30% higher than seeds planted dry. The mechanism is straightforward. Seeds have a natural coating designed to resist decay during winter. That same coating slows water penetration in spring. The peroxide softens the coating and delivers extra oxygen directly to the embryo inside. The Amish in Lancaster County had been doing a version of this for generations, using water treated with a small amount of peroxide kept in a ceramic crock by the back door. They had no university paper to cite. They just knew their seedlings came up faster and stronger than those of their English neighbors. When plants developed aphids, spider mites, or powdery mildew, a spray of 1 teaspoon per cup of water applied to the leaves in early morning, before direct sun hit, eliminated the pests without harming the plant, and without leaving any residue on the food. The same spray worked on struggling plants showing signs of root rot. Applied to the soil around the base, it oxygenated the root zone and often reversed the damage within days. These techniques worked. They kept working. They still work today. But between 1970 and 1990, every major gardening brand quietly stopped mentioning them and started selling individual products for each problem. A fungicide, a pesticide, a germination booster, a root health formula. 4 bottles, each between $10 and $20, replacing 1 brown bottle that costs $3. All across 40 million American gardening households. That math represents a product category worth billions that did not need to exist. And now the technique that changes how you see the food on your table. In 1965, the United States Department of Agriculture published a small bulletin on post-harvest produce handling in homestead settings. It was not widely circulated. It was printed on thin paper, distributed through county extension offices to farmers who requested it specifically, and almost never reprinted after the first run. Inside that bulletin was a technique the Pennsylvania Dutch farmers had been using since at least the 1920s. They called it the vitality rinse. Here's what it is. After harvesting, especially leafy greens, like tomatoes, strawberries, and cucumbers, you fill a large ceramic or enameled basin with cold water. Add 1/4 cup of 3% hydrogen peroxide per gallon of water. Immerse the vegetables for 5 to 10 minutes. Drain on clean cloths. Store in a cool cellar or refrigerator. That is the entire process. No special equipment. No refrigeration required. No vacuum sealing. What that 1965 bulletin documented, and what multiple small agricultural studies confirmed in the years following, was that treated vegetables lasted anywhere from 2 to 3 times as long in storage as untreated vegetables. Strawberries that normally lasted 4 days lasted 12. Lettuce that wilted in 1 week stayed crisp for 3. Tomatoes held their firmness for nearly a month. Cucumbers that turned soft inside 10 days stayed crisp for 3 weeks. The mechanism is now well understood. The peroxide eliminates the surface mold spores and bacteria that cause produce to decay from the outside in. Without those organisms, the vegetable breaks down at its own natural internal pace, which is dramatically slower. The Amish in Lancaster County still do this at every farm. They do not call it by either name from the bulletin. They call it rinsing. But every farmhouse had a basin, a bottle, and produce that outlasted anything you could buy in a grocery store. You can do this tonight. Fill a bowl with cold water, add 1/4 cup of 3% peroxide per gallon. Soak your produce for 5 to 10 minutes. Drain, dry, and store the way you normally would. Then watch what does not happen. Watch the strawberries not go fuzzy on day 4. Watch the lettuce still be crisp on day 15. Watch the tomatoes hold their texture on the counter for 3 weeks. Watch your grocery bill drop over the next 3 months as you stop throwing out food you already paid for. This is the knowledge that was not banned. It was not declared illegal. It was not removed by regulation. It was buried, quietly, systematically, profitably, under 40 years of marketing designed to convince you that you needed a different bottle in a different color for a different room for a different task every single week of your life. It was replaced so gradually, so completely, that most American households never noticed it was gone. Right here on Secret Vault, that is the territory we operate in. The knowledge that got quietly shuffled off the shelf when someone figured out it was more profitable to sell you 15 things than one. Think about what you have in your cabinets right now. Count the bottles, count the sprays, count the specialty formulas for specific surfaces, specific fabrics, specific rooms. Then count how many of them are doing something that one $3 brown bottle was already doing before any of those products existed. Your grandmother knew this, her mother knew it, and sometime around 1962, somebody decided that you should not. They replaced one bottle with 15 products and built an industry on the difference. The Amish never watched that story being told. They never changed what was already working. They just kept the brown bottle on the shelf and kept passing it down, quietly, generation after generation, while the rest of the country was being sold the idea that simple was not good enough. Simple was always good enough. Simple worked better. Here at Secret Vault, this is exactly the kind of recovered knowledge we dig into. The techniques that existed before the marketing replaced them. The methods that the industry had a financial interest in helping you forget. Because here's the thing about knowledge like this. It does not disappear. It just waits. It sits in old USDA bulletins printed on thin paper in 1965. It sits in the practices of families who never owned a television. It sits in peer-reviewed dental and veterinary journals that nobody is paid to publicize. It sits there, patient and unchanged, exactly as effective as it always was, waiting for someone to come looking for it. You came looking. You found it. Now you know what to do with a $3 bottle that most people walk right past on the bottom shelf. The question is, which of these uses surprised you the most? The produce rinse that can triple the shelf life of your strawberries, the grout technique that outperforms every specialty bathroom cleaner, the seed soak that was quietly documented by Cornell and Ohio State and then quietly buried, the cutting board method that has been practiced in Amish kitchens for 100 years. Pick one and go try it before the week is out. Then come back here and tell us what happened. Because this is how the knowledge comes back. One kitchen at a time, one cabinet at a time, one person who stopped forgetting and started remembering. The brown bottle has been sitting there the whole time. It was just waiting for you to pick it up again.